The sun had not yet climbed above the Roman skyline when Sister Cecilia entered the press secretary's office in the Apostolic Palace. She always arrived early, tidying the mahogany desk and setting out a neat stack of correspondence for the day. The silence of the corridors comforted her. She found solace in the unspoken prayers that seemed to linger in the Vatican air before the world's clamor rushed in. Yet that morning, as the overhead light flickered to life, something felt awry. Placed squarely on the press secretary's desk was a white envelope, its starkness unsettling. There were no stamps, no seals, no official insignia. Only 5 words scrawled across the front: to the Holy Father and Cardinals. Sister Cecilia halted. In her years assisting the press office, she had seen all manner of letters and packages, lavish gifts from dignitaries, well-worn pleas from humble parishioners, even cryptic messages from self-proclaimed visionaries. But this was different. Usually, something so crucial would arrive by registered courier, or at least through a staff member with a signature line in the logbook. She glanced toward the corridor, half expecting to see someone lurking. All remained quiet. Her pulse quickened as she moved closer, touching the envelope with hesitant fingertips. It felt heavier than a single sheet of paper should, as if the quiet inside might contain an ominous weight. Anxious, she sought out Father Mateo, a gentle older priest who worked in the office next door. His brow furrowed the moment he saw her troubled face. When she led him back into the press secretary's chamber, he, too, fell silent at the sight of the envelope. With deliberate care, they opened it and discovered an unsigned letter. The script inside slanted in hurried strokes, each line seemingly scratched down in some private frenzy. The top of the page opened with a solemn declaration, like an oath in a courtroom or some archaic vow. I swear before God that every word herein is true. Should I be proven false, I accept all spiritual and temporal consequences. Then came the accusation that made Sister Cecilia's heart lurch. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, beloved throughout much of the Catholic world for his gentleness and humility, stood accused of violating his vows of celibacy. The letter claimed photographic proof would soon come to light, describing a supposed secret marriage and a betrayal of everything he stood for. They read it twice, scarcely believing the words. Father Mateo's hand trembled slightly when he reached the end. He glanced at Sister Cecilia, who whispered in a voice laced with dread, "We need to bring this to the Holy Father immediately." Together, they made their way through the warren of Vatican corridors, walking past centuries-old tapestries and walls steeped in history, until they stood before the door to the Pope's private study. A Swiss guard admitted them at once, having seen the urgency in their eyes. Inside, Pope Leo XIV sat by a narrow window, reading his morning meditation. A sunbeam, thin and pale in the early hour, flickered over the lines of scripture open on his lap. He looked up, a mild curiosity in his features. Father Mateo and Sister Cecilia approached with bowed heads and offered the envelope. The Pope studied its plain exterior for a moment before carefully withdrawing the folded letter. His calm expression never wavered. He scanned the text in silence, not a whisper escaping his lips until he finished reading. After a time, he set the letter aside and exhaled slowly. There was no flash of anger, no immediate condemnation, only a grief that settled in the gentle furrows of his brow. "We have seen slander and rumor before," he murmured, "but this carries a sharper edge." He held the paper between his fingertips, as if weighing its significance. "Summon Cardinal Lynn. Let us gather the cardinals who can be trusted. This cannot remain hidden in a drawer. The truth must guide our steps." Within the hour, 6 senior cardinals and close advisors gathered around a long oak table in a formal chamber, its arched windows overlooking the rooftops of Rome. Candles glowed despite the day having started. The corners of a room seemed cloaked in dim hush. Pope Leo XIV stood at the head of the table, the anonymous letter in hand, as the others looked on. He read aloud the unholy vow and the haunting accusation, insisting that Cardinal Tagle had secretly taken a wife, or at least broken his vow of chastity. The letter threatened irrefutable evidence. At the mention of Tagle's name, Several of the gathered cardinals exchanged alarmed glances, for few figures in modern Catholicism were as widely respected as he was. Gentle in persona, yet firm in faith, Tagle was, for many, a symbol of genuine service, especially to the marginalized. One older cardinal, speaking softly, dared to question aloud the authenticity of the threat. Could it be a hoax? Another cardinal, more cynical, predicted that even if it were baseless, the rumor alone might sow chaos. Archbishop Gervasi, an academic with a keen sense of strategy, pointed out that if it spread, the Church could face a massive credibility crisis. Cardinal Oki, whose voice resonated with a quiet authority, remarked that the letter seemed designed to deliver a killing blow not just to Tagle's reputation, but to the Church's unity, especially at a time when many conservative and progressive viewpoints were clashing. If the forging of a scandal was intended, it was a cunning one. The Pope, listening to these reactions, nodded gravely. He then turned to them all and explained that the gravity of such an accusation, especially if it was a lie, demanded an immediate, thorough investigation. Deciding in that moment, he spoke of forming an independent commission to dig for truth. He would not let the specter of rumor undermine justice. Silence fell after his words, the gravity of the moment clear. No one left that room with illusions. However improbable the accusation, it could not be dismissed out of hand. The next morning, a sealed directive was quietly delivered to hand-picked individuals. Cardinal Giuseppe Rinaldi, a canon lawyer known for his meticulous pursuit of facts, Cardinal Henri Vauban, an esteemed theologian steeped in ecclesial ethics, Monsignor Veri, the Vatican's chief archivist, skilled at spotting historical forgeries, Dr. Alessia Fornari, a laywoman respected worldwide for her digital forensics expertise, and Dr. Marcus Weldon, an American lawyer from the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace who had prosecuted international cases. Together, they would examine every shred of evidence, track every rumor, and test every possibility. Pope Leo wanted no partial truths. It had to be transparent, thorough, and independent to protect the Church from suspicion of cover-ups or bias. The directive placed a heavy burden on them. Evaluate the letter, any alleged photographic proof, and the cardinal's own testimony. They were to discover whether Cardinal Tagle had truly betrayed his vows or whether this was a cruelly orchestrated deception. The commission held its first meeting in a small reading room next to the Vatican Library. It was far from the usual chambers of power, a place lined with shelves of ancient manuscripts, quiet, almost solemn. Rinaldi, the chair, placed the mysterious letter at the center of the table. The others came in, one by one, with a sense of hushed responsibility. They prayed briefly at the start, then began their work. Dr. Fornari went to examine a photograph that had been provided by the same anonymous source, sent via a cryptic email to the press office that morning. This black-and-white image purported to show Cardinal Tagle in a private Vatican study, appearing to hold a woman in a close embrace. The vantage point was distant, the features blurry, but for anyone glancing at it, the figure's posture and slender form did bear a striking resemblance to Tagle's. The question was whether it was real or manipulated. For several long hours, she studied the pixels under magnification. She checked for metadata anomalies, layering artifacts, inconsistent shadows. Sitting at a laptop near an ornate window, she zoomed in on the man's shoulders, the woman's hair, the reflection in what looked like a glass bookshelf behind them. Eventually, she sighed and called Dr. Weldon over to see certain distortions. There was a subtle warping near the neckline and a curious outline near the woman's hand. The reflection on the glossy surface behind the pair appeared to show only the male figure, not the woman. Dr. Weldon took notes, cross-referencing date stamps. The file had apparently been created with an Adobe Photoshop suite just 3 days before it was delivered to the Vatican. This strongly indicated digital tampering. The commissioners looked at each other with equal parts relief and disquiet. If it was a forgery, they had a lead. But if someone had gone to this length, it meant a deeply motivated attacker was at work. At the same time, The commission began verifying Cardinal Tagle's schedule for the date and time the letter claimed the wrongdoing occurred. According to the anonymous accuser, the incident happened on a particular evening at exactly 7:02 p.m., with Tagle supposedly meeting a mysterious woman in his private study. As the commissioners checked security logs, they discovered that Tagle had left the Vatican around 5 p.m. that day for a liturgy at the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls. He was recorded on camera giving a homily at 7 p.m., and numerous witnesses, from clergy to lay faithful, confirmed he was still at the Basilica when the letter insisted he was elsewhere. Tagle had not returned to the Apostolic Palace until nearly 9:45 p.m. Video from corridor cameras showed no one entering or exiting his study at 7:02. The timeline proved impossible. Meanwhile, the commissioners extended their research into Cardinal Tagle's life. They requested files from Manila covering his decades of ministry, seminary evaluations, letters of reference from superiors, testimonies from those who knew him intimately. Everything pointed to a man of exemplary moral character, someone who had never shown so much as a hint of impropriety. In Manila, Tagle was famous for spending nights in the poorest neighborhoods, hearing confessions on street corners, delivering heartfelt homilies about mercy. Filipino faithful considered him a living embodiment of compassion. Some devout Catholics in Manila caught wind of the rumor and spontaneously gathered outside the cathedral, lighting candles in prayerful support of their cardinal. Emails, letters, and postcards flooded the Vatican, many urging that the Holy See defend him. Inside the quiet offices of the Commission, the portrait of Tagle that emerged was deeply consistent: humble, devout, intellectually honest, emotionally empathetic. No sign of hidden relationships, no suspicious gaps in his travel records, no odd financial transactions that might hint at clandestine family support. It all felt like a direct contradiction of the claim that he had broken his vows or entered any kind of secret union. The more they uncovered, the more the entire accusation reeked of deliberate sabotage. One afternoon, the Pope quietly visited the commissioners. In the hush of that reading room, with the lamps glowing over piles of documents and forensic charts, he asked them, "What sense do you have?" A forgery indeed. He looked particularly at Dr. Fornari, who nodded solemnly, explaining that the photo's background and the actual stance of the alleged figures couldn't align in real physics. There was an outline of a second hand that doesn't match either subject's posture, she noted. The more technical details she offered, the clearer it became. Someone had combined an image of Tagle, likely from another event at a bookshelf or study, and superimposed a second figure, a woman's shape taken from elsewhere. Even the reflection in the glass behind them revealed only Tagle's silhouette. The perpetrators had done a careful, if not flawless, job. The Pope listened without interrupting. A sorrow flickered in his gaze, for while it was comforting that the evidence pointed to Tagle's innocence, it was devastating that someone had meticulously crafted this lie to devastate his reputation. He thanked the commissioners and prayed with them, voice trembling slightly. If the devil wanted to strike at the heart, he would aim at a man who stands for mercy, he said. Let us remain steadfast in the truth. Let us respond with neither vengeance nor fear. A few evenings later, the commissioners met again to discuss the possible motive. Dr. Weldon had discovered that the digital footprints behind the manipulated photo led to accounts connected with fringe Catholic groups that loathed Tagle's perceived progressive stances. The name Antonio Silva surfaced, a disgruntled former Vatican media technician. Communications also pointed to a lay consultant from a conservative think tank with documented hostility toward Tagle's emphasis on pastoral inclusion from marginalized communities. The conspirators' email exchanges, once deciphered, revealed frustration with Tagle's rising influence. They feared he was too lenient, that his gentle approach might one day steer the entire church away from true doctrine. Realizing he might be a future contender for the papacy, they decided to orchestrate a scandal big enough to remove him from any shortlist. This was not random gossip. It was a deliberate plan to crush Tagle's moral authority by painting him as a hypocrite. All these findings, from the photo forensics to the timeline proof, were compiled into a growing report. It ran hundreds of pages, each piece of evidence reinforcing Tagle's innocence and exposing the forgery. The commission members did not gloat. There was only a deep sadness that internal church politics had sunk to this level. The church was ever vulnerable to attacks from within, fear wearing the mask of righteousness. Monsignor Very, known for his calm wisdom, summarized it during a meeting. Some see mercy as softness. Others fear dialogue will erode identity. This was an attempt to purge what they consider a threat. But forging a scandal is not the way of Christ. In the meantime, Cardinal Tagle had been asked to appear before the commission to give personal testimony. He arrived on a warm afternoon, entering the unadorned meeting room with a gentle demeanor, wearing his simple cardinal's cassock. He bowed to them, thanked them for their commitment to the truth, and calmly answered every question about his schedule, his vow of celibacy, his travels. He confirmed that, on the day in question, he had been at St. Paul outside the walls, finishing a liturgy that was well documented. He described his unwavering commitment to the vow he had taken, the vow that he considered not a burden, but a gift to God. He spoke in that soft voice people knew so well, explaining that while the allegations pained him, he was most worried for the faithful who might lose heart or question God in the face of scandal. He showed no anger, just a profound sadness. "I forgive whoever orchestrated this," he said, "for we must not return hatred with hatred. If we do, we depart from the path of mercy Christ taught us." At the news that the photograph was a forgery, he simply closed his eyes for a moment and whispered thanks to God. There was no relief for himself alone. He implored the commissioners and the Pope to use this moment to teach the Church about honest discernment. By the time he left that day, some of the commissioners found themselves deeply moved, even changed. Here was a man who had been publicly assaulted by rumors, yet showed only sorrow and forgiveness. Within a month, the commission delivered its final conclusion. The entire claim was false. The letter's vow, so dramatically written, was a sham. The photograph was conclusively manipulated. The timeline was impossible. The motive behind it was ideological, orchestrated by people who feared Tagle's compassionate approach. The final report stretched nearly 400 pages and included statements from digital experts, testimonies from priests and laypeople, theological reflections from Cardinal Vauban, and an exhaustive set of images comparing the forged photo with its original source, an innocuous photograph of Tagle alone at a bookshelf during an interfaith event in 2022. The coverage was so thorough that only the most cynical observer could call it incomplete. Pope Leo XIV received the full report in his private study. He read it slowly, each page a mixture of heartbreak and vindication. When he finished, he removed his reading glasses, pressed his palms together, and prayed. He prayed for Tagle, for those who had conspired to destroy him, and for the entire Church. Then he arranged a public declaration of Tagle's complete exoneration. The announcement would be solemn, read aloud in a formal gathering of the cardinals, and broadcast to the global Catholic community. The Holy Father felt that after such a grievous falsehood, the Church needed to see not only the cardinal's innocence established, but also the Pope's clear condemnation of the lie. Yet he cautioned his aides that this condemnation must not be a vendetta or a demonization of those behind it. His approach was consistent. Name the truth, reaffirm mercy. The appointed day arrived for the Church to hear the official verdict. The ornate council hall, with its marble floors and Renaissance frescoes overhead, filled with cardinals and senior clerics. There was tension in the air. Rumors had circulated that a major statement would be made. Many had guessed it concerned Tagle, whose name had caused hushed conversations for weeks. As the Pope took his place, robed in white with a simple pectoral cross, hush fell over the hall. Cardinal Rinaldi, the head of the investigative commission, approached a lectern and recounted key points from the investigation. The nature of the letter, the forged photograph, the impossible timeline, the real identity of those who had sought to frame Tagle. Every ear listened intently. At the end, he read the conclusive words, "We find Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle innocent of all accusations." The alleged evidence is proven falsified, and the timeline for these claims is wholly discredited. The vow of celibacy he has kept remains untarnished. A ripple of relief seemed to wash over the gathered cardinals. Then Pope Leo XIV rose to address them, speaking in a tone both firm and compassionate. He declared that the conspiracy revealed the deep divisions and fears lurking among some within the Church. He proclaimed Tagle innocent, without hesitation and without condition, stating that a great injustice had been attempted but would not stand. Justice had been done, and the truth had prevailed. The message was to be sent worldwide within 24 hours. At that moment, the grand doors of the hall opened, and Cardinal Tagle appeared at the threshold. No formal introduction, no fanfare, just the man in his red cassock, walking quietly toward the Pope. The two embraced, a gesture of fatherly affection on one side and childlike humility on the other. Many who watched felt tears in their eyes. The hush was so intense that the faint echo of Tagle's footsteps sounded like a heartbeat in the stillness. He bowed deeply to the Pope and then turned to face the assembly. In a voice that carried a gentle resonance, he thanked the commission, thanked the Holy Father, and offered forgiveness to those who had sought his downfall. "I am no saint," he said, "but I follow one who gave his life for his enemies. I cannot do otherwise than forgive." That last line, spoken with trembling sincerity, caused a few onlookers to wonder if they had just witnessed a moment of true Christian witness in the heart of the institutional Church. The moment of exoneration reverberated well beyond the Vatican walls. News outlets reported it globally. While many faithful rejoiced, some corners of the public sphere responded cynically, suspecting a cover-up. The suspicion was not entirely surprising. Scandal sells. But the Vatican released swaths of evidence, from forensic data to travel logs, rendering the official account irrefutable to those willing to read it. In Manila, crowds gathered outside the cathedral in gratitude, praying the rosary under a banner that read, "Welcome home, our shepherd." Across social media, testimonies poured in from people who said Tagle's suffering and his graceful response had renewed their faith. Seminarians spoke of how they now better understood the precarious line a priest walks in the public eye. Sisters in remote convents offered prayers of thanksgiving. Even some of Tagle's critics seemed taken aback by his calm generosity of spirit. Cardinal Tagle himself, after the official pronouncement, gave only one direct interview. He told Vatican media that he harbored no ill will. Instead, he prayed the Church would learn deeper lessons about verifying accusations, about how easily technology could forge illusions, and about ensuring that suspicion never overshadowed charity. He resumed his regular pastoral duties with quiet resolve and launched a new initiative, Mission Mercy, aimed at sending volunteer priests and nuns to regions of the world scarred by conflict and displacement. He maintained that the Church grows by accompanying the vulnerable, not by withdrawing into fortresses of fear. Pope Leo XIV, too, recognized the significance of these events. He summoned a special synod on restoration to examine how the Church might better handle false or anonymous accusations in the future and to strengthen guidelines on transparency. The new protocols mandated thorough preliminary evidence checks before any public statements were made about alleged scandals, especially those capable of destroying someone's reputation overnight. A standing commission for digital misinformation and ecclesial security was set up, with Tagle asked to serve as a spiritual advisor. He accepted the role, seeing it as a chance to ensure what happened to him would not befall another innocent servant of the Church. With time, the conspiracy was further uncovered. Antonio Silva, who had orchestrated the forged image, fled Rome but was tracked down by civil authorities, and the Vatican publicly encouraged cooperation with any legal processes. Nevertheless, Pope Leo showed no appetite for punitive retribution beyond what justice demanded. Instead, he emphasized that the Church had to root out the spiritual sickness behind such acts. Fear, disguised as doctrinal purity, had led men to commit a mortal sin against truth itself. In the months that followed, as Tagle moved about the global Church, visiting refugee camps, leading Eucharistic celebrations in impoverished districts, washing the feet of the homeless. His presence carried new gravity. The ordeal had exposed him to a deep personal cross, and that cross seemed to have refined him rather than defeated him. Everywhere he went, people asked how he managed to forgive. He often replied softly, "Because I, too, am in need of forgiveness. And Christ's mercy is infinite." Such words resonated with a world hungering for witness more than argument. Gradually, Tagle came to embody the paradox of Christian leadership that grows stronger through suffering. Pope Leo XIV, reflecting on the entire chain of events, wrote a pastoral letter read in parishes worldwide. He urged the faithful to remember that the Church's greatest threats often rise from within. The seeds of pride, rivalry, and fear that can drive people to commit terrible acts under the guise of holiness. He praised Cardinal Tagle for demonstrating how to suffer calumny with grace, reminding Catholics that the truth needs no shouting, only steadfast hearts that refuse to be swayed by malice. In these ways, what began as a single envelope left mysteriously on a desk in the pre-dawn hush unfolded into a trial that tested the Church's commitment to justice, mercy, and truth. The forging of a single photograph could have irreparably damaged a beloved cardinal's reputation, but diligence, transparency, and the quiet hand of Providence kept the lie from triumphing. The investigators who uncovered the forgery did more than protect one man. They guarded the integrity of the entire ecclesial community. Cardinal Tagle, far from succumbing to bitterness, emerged as a testament that even the worst deception can be redeemed when met with forgiveness and unwavering trust in the one who is truth itself. Late one evening, after the final swirl of press conferences and official pronouncements, Pope Leo XIV found himself walking alone through the Vatican gardens. The sky shimmered with starlight, and the hush of the evening recalled that very morning so many weeks ago when the envelope first appeared. He paused at a small grotto, kneeling on the grass, whispering a prayer for unity. In his mind's eye, he saw the countless faithful across the world who had prayed, the frightened conspirators who had wrought this mess, the cardinal who had been so viciously maligned yet emerged unbroken. At that same hour, Cardinal Tagle sat by the window of a modest guest room, not far from the Roman seminary where new priests were being formed. He read a letter from a young seminarian who confessed that he nearly lost faith when the scandal broke, but found it again after watching Tagle's steadfastness. The cardinal placed the letter aside and silently prayed for that seminarian, for the souls of those who forged the lie, and for the Church they all served. He remembered the swirl of fear in the rumor's aftermath, and how that fear had nearly consumed the hearts of many. He murmured a verse from Scripture that had anchored him through sleepless nights. "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." In Manila, thousands of miles away, a group of the faithful gathered once more at the cathedral to celebrate the final exoneration of their beloved shepherd. Candles flickered in the warm night air. Voices rose in hymns of thanksgiving. Among them were street children who had once known Tagle's tender attention, elderly women who had been touched by his words, and countless ordinary parishioners who believed that God, in his quiet but unwavering way, had preserved the innocence of a man devoted to reflecting Christ's compassion. The Church did not break. Instead, in the midst of a carefully crafted lie, it rediscovered the power of truth verified, charity practiced, and humility lived. Yes, the memory of that forged photograph would linger as a lesson in vigilance and the ever-present threat of internal sabotage. But far more enduring was the legacy of how it ended. The anonymous letter's malice could not stand before the patient, courageous search for fact, culminating in a final, undeniable affirmation of Cardinal Tagle's innocence. And so, it was that a mysterious white envelope, left in the hush of dawn on a mahogany desk, launched a storm of suspicion that threatened to tear at the seams of the world's largest Christian body. Yet through prayer, diligence, and the consistent application of justice and mercy, the Church weathered the storm and emerged, if not unscathed, then wiser and more united. In the forgiving heart of the man they tried to destroy, Many saw anew the face of the one who forgave his persecutors. In that reflection lay the Church's hope, that every wound inflicted by fear and malice could be bound up by the gentle, steady hands of truth and grace.